Okay, it's recording. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. It is utilizing the NDE Comprehensive Needs Assessment for School Improvement. I'm Shirley Vargas. I'm the administrator for the Office of School and District Support at the NDE, and I'm joined by two colleagues from Hourglass. I'll turn it over to Jeff and Mike and Ro to introduce themselves.
And hi, everybody. I'll do a quick introduction for Mike, Ro, and myself. So we are from a software development company called Hourglass, and we have had the very great privilege of working with Shirley and the NDE to develop something called the CNA web app. Some of you, I recognize your faces and I recognize your names, and so I know you're familiar with it. Some of you are brand new, so we'll tell you a little bit more about it today. But we are joining you from sunny, you can probably tell from Mike, his screen, there's a reflection of a little lake that's right by the office there. And we are joining you from sunny and fairly warm Scottsdale, Arizona. And it's a pleasure to meet all of you. And I suppose just to kind of give a role to each person. So in terms of what Hourglass does and how we assist you guys, for the most part, if you're interacting with anybody from, I'll call it support, so app support, and some of you have been copied on emails to Hourglass support by Shirley. For the most part, you're talking to Mike, Ro, and me. And so we serve a little bit as project managers, a little bit as support personnel. And then as you get to know Ro, you'll learn that he is pretty fancy with design work as well. And so he helped us design the CNA web app. And in addition to support, he may do some cool stuff based on the feedback that you guys give us. And so it's again a pleasure to meet you. And Shirley, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome, thank you. So to kick us off, I'm going to share my screen here, but I don't want to miss out on thanking you again, each of you, from joining from. I think some of you are still not in session yet. So I appreciate you all taking the time out of your vacation and your break to join. And from my colleagues from NDE and NEMTSS and ESUs who are on also joining in on this fun today. So to share my screen really quickly, I have a really quick and kind of, icebreakery welcome inclusion activity. Just in the chat really briefly, what was a highlight from your break? And if you're still in it, please let us know what you're still doing, or something that you're most excited for in 2024. So take about 30 to 60 seconds to just jot something in there. And if you see the pictures, I'm looking forward to probably doing a little bit more reading for self and maybe checking off some things off of that to-do list. Family, love it. Spring, yes. Couch time, fun. Oh, I love the connections to family. It was great. I love that, and I'm glad you all are able to do that. And okay, Tony's ready to go. Let's keep it moving. All right, love that energy. So it's just a quick little way to ease our way into this conversation. Sometimes we think about a needs assessment and we're like, oh my gosh, of course we do that already. We do a bunch of different things. And today, there are three main objectives that I really want to focus our time on. It's kind of split up into two segments. The first segment will be me talking a little bit more about requirements, just understanding the designations, the difference between those. And then the second half is really Jeff and the team really going in and kind of going through like a live demo, right? So what does it actually look like? What does it mean to interact with the interface? We're going to share some data that we also shared in July from NDE admin days. And we expect to have some more updated data, obviously, after many of you engage with the tool, that we'll be able to share back with you around not only how you're experiencing the tool, what are some adjustments, but also overall trends related to how the CNA is being used. So to jump right in, I'm going to get us started with an ESSA overview. And some of these slides might be a little bit redundant if you joined me last week or 2 weeks ago, or was it last? I can't recall. But when you joined me last for the ESSA designation webinar, or if you join me tomorrow, you'll have kind of, the precursor to that session. The first thing I want to just reiterate is just like definitions and maybe just level set on that. When we talk about comprehensive support and improvement, so this designation is where this require, like where I want to dig into a little bit. CSI, by definition, is actually any public school that is among the lowest 5% of overall performance of Title I schools. It's also any high school that has a 4-year graduation rate less than 67%, right? So you may have a combined rate that's higher, but it's specifically to the 4-year cohort. It's also this new designation that we have for the first time this year, which is any public school that had an ATSI designation that did not exit. So you had a student group. This is the first time from 2019 where this student group would be eligible to exit. And unfortunately, they did not meet the exit criteria and now have become a CSI school, right? All of these things, right, typically should occur every 3 years, but because of the pandemic and flexibility is awarded to us, we are now kind of feeling like we just did it last year, right? I know some schools received the designation last year, some did a few years ago, so it kind of feels like the timelines are off. But the intention is that we're now back in this time frame where it happens every 3 years, and we will not be engaging in this process of doing these designations until 2026. I just want to reiterate that because that's super important in terms of the time frame for this designation. And then additionally, every CSI school is monitored every year by NDE staff and the U.S. Department of Ed as appropriate or necessary, especially when they're monitoring us as a department. So what does it mean then? What do we have to do? What are the next steps? You all received a letter from myself outlining a couple of things, pretty lengthy as we're required to ensure that we inform all districts and schools regarding their designations. But something I want to make a clear distinction about is that any CSI school, so how I describe CSI specifically, low 5%, low grad rate, is required to do the entire needs assessment. So that means, Brandy, you just were identified CSI for lowest 5% this year. You have to include a brand new needs assessment. This is also, so schools that were identified in 2018, identified in 2022 also did that process, right? Because this is your first time being identified. This is the first time you're engaging in with the entire tool. For all other schools and schools identified as CSI, ATSI, you have some options, right? So we want to make sure that you understand what those options are. Versus you could decide you want to take the entire needs assessment again. Maybe it'd been 2 years or a year, whatever the case is. There's an option where you can engage in a screener. And then based off of your responses to that screener, the platform automatically highlights for you, oh, these are some tenants you may want to focus on. Now there's some options and the team will go through that, how you might be able to maybe you end up getting like, I don't know, 5 out of the 7, right? Like, so you may want to consider maybe narrowing some of those down. That's totally up to you, but the screener is based off of the information you provide. And then the third is manually selecting the tenants to complete. Let's say, for example, in your school district, you have a really strong focus on implementation of HQIM, and you have a lot of work related to strengthening those ties also to CTE and work-based learning. So maybe you want to really focus on teaching, learning, and serving and some of those tenants in there. So you can decide to do that. One thing that is new for this year, and you're hearing it hot off the presses, and everyone who will need to hear this will receive this information, is we are requiring every school, CSI, CSI, ATSI, CSI exiting, whatever the case is, we're requiring every school to complete the educational opportunities and access tenant. And I will tell you more about where that's coming from in a few slides, but I wanted to just share that right now so that you have an idea as we go through the PowerPoint today where we're coming from with this work. And to keep going with the designations here, just as a reminder, maybe you also have some other schools in your districts that have other designations. These designations, TSI and ATSI, are specific to student group performance, but they're not required to complete the CNA. You can choose to do that. So let's say you're on the call now because you have a CSI school, but you also have 2 other schools that have ATSI designations. Maybe you want to consider what it would mean for the 3 schools to do a similar process so that you can kind of get some district level data. That's something you can consider, but it's not a requirement from the NDE. So then to break it down a little bit further, right? So just talked about making sure we understand the designations and their definitions. And now we want to just talk a little bit about the comprehensive needs assessment as a whole. So why do we even have a comprehensive needs assessment? What's the point, right? So first of all, I want to draw your attention to the image that's on the left-hand side. That's our NAMTSS problem-solving model. And a lot of times when we talk about, we have a problem, right? And because we're educators and problem solvers, we know we feel it deeply and we want to do something about it, but we have to be data informed, right? So we want to make sure that we're also following a process that allows for these types of steps. We want to ensure that you're identifying a school's strengths as well as areas for improvement. You want to ensure that there's, practices that are highlighted in the CNA that have been evidence-based and are research-based that are supporting and are supportive of student learning. Again, database decision-making that's geared towards improvement. And ultimately, this is about continuous improvement, right? This designation is not the end, right? It's definitely, all right, not the end of the world. It shouldn't feel like, I know it feels like that sometimes, but what's really important here is that this is part of your continuous improvement process and how we help our educators and our school leaders get better at supporting our students so that they can continue to increase and be their best versions of themselves, right? So what does this actually mean? We talk a lot about data, and the CNA provides us one piece of that data puzzle, right? So what we wanted to just show you here with this image is the AQuest domain and tenants and how that actually serves as a piece of process data for us, right? And when we look at the image on the right, the Bernhardt model, we really love using this Clover image because we're really looking at the intersection of all these different data sources, right? Our AQuest data is giving us some of that student learning data. Sometimes it also provides some demographic data. We does not include perceptual data nor process data, right? So just looking at AQuest data is insufficient to accurately, diagnose and then problem solve for a root cause. So this is a really great way to be able to say, okay, now how can we triangulate this data? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So how is it broken down? So when I say you have to complete the entire needs assessment, there are 81 individual items. So it is a pretty lengthy resource, but it doesn't have to be completed all in one sitting, right? Can you imagine what that would mean for a faculty meeting? Right, so you may want to consider how you would want to break that up. But it's situated overall 3 domains. There are 6 tenants. There are 22 areas of focus and 81 dimensions, like I mentioned. And I wanted to just break that down here for you in the different tenant language. So the domains, student success, access, and support, and you see the 3 tenants there. Domains for teaching, learning, and serving. And then lastly, leadership. Leadership is when I just really quickly take a moment here to describe leadership. Leadership, the language comes from the original 2015 AQuest iteration, where it wasn't included so much in as its own domain and as its own tenants, but it was rather leadership is everywhere. So it should be included in the other 2 domains. However, when we were creating or revising the CNA, it was important to pull out leadership. And also, if you saw the image from a few slides ago, right, that's where it's starting, right? That's where that foundation is laid for professional learning, for community and relationship building, for resource management. So we wanted to pull that out, but they weren't in fact tenants, they're actually areas of focus. Nonetheless, they are situated as individual pieces that you can score on the CNA, and we'll go through that in a moment. So I said we'd talk about why educational opportunities and access. Of the 90 schools that are CSI, 40, I believe 42 are CSI low performing, right? That leaves the remainder, right? 56 schools that are identified for student group performance. That means it's very possible that your school overall might be classified as a good school, great school, maybe even excellent, but you have a student group that is not performing at that same level. They're actually performing at the level of the 42 other CSI schools that are the lowest 5% of Title I buildings. That's really important to consider, right? So maybe we're doing everything we absolutely can, But what we want to do by pulling attention to this specific tenant is first is that we are partners with you on this, right? In order for us to get better at the delivery of our services and supports that we provide, we actually need the data from you all so that we can say, actually, we need to strengthen some resources, or we don't have any resources here, or this is something that's been overlooked, or it's actually just, it's better practice for us, for our continuous improvement, to provide better guidance and resources and support implementation that way. So specifically for Ed Opportunities and Access, what you see here is technology infrastructure, digital learning, student support services, school culture and climate, early learning opportunities, comprehensive learning opportunities. So these pieces here, and you see the items that are here as well. So the blue highlighted is the area of focus, the clear bullets then are the dimensions or the items that you would discretely have to answer for each school. So we wanted to then say, great, not just don't go off and do the CNA, right? But we want to really situate it in this mindset of continuous improvement and ensuring that you maintain an open mind when you're going through this process, especially when you're collecting, reviewing, and analyzing the data. It's a self-assessment. It's only as good as the responses you provide. So if everything is 4s and you're still identified, then that's something that you may want to consider about the legitimacy of the scores you're providing, which leads to actually one of the bullets here, that the rating discussion is as informative as the results, which is why this should be completed as a team, right? You might consider what which perspectives are overrepresented or underrepresented as you're engaging with your teams, leveraging a team that maybe already exists. But you might consider, is your SPED director included in that? A school counselor, perhaps, psychologists, teachers, right? Considering who would be part of this team that could provide you with ample information to give you the most accurate and reliable rating for a particular tenant or dimension. And then when reviewing the results, it's really important to consider, well, you do the CNA, and of course you're doing it because the ND told you, right? But it's really informative and most beneficial when you're then sharing those results back and then going through that process with your entire school community around, well, here's what the results have illuminated for us or have confirmed for us, or maybe are telling us to go in a different direction, especially when you're triangulating that data with the other sets of data, like I showed you with that Clover image a few slides before. So putting all that together, the NDE does not dictate a particular improvement plan you should do, while CSI and CSI ATSI schools will be eligible to receive federal funds. Those are in the application that you use. That's not the improvement plan. That's just, okay, great. We know what your intentions are. We see your data, but your plan is where you're actually making the work happen and where it's a living and breathing document. And we obviously like to uplift our NEMTSS continuous improvement plan template, which you see here, a quick snapshot. Essentially, the snapshot here, though, is how you might include a snapshot of your CNA completed on that tool, so that way you have a running record of that. And here, essentially, this school completed it entirely, and then you see their scores on the right-hand side, excuse me. Another way of looking at it, and then I'll have the team actually engage in that in a moment, but is that you can include another snapshot related to the visual, how it is on the dashboard. So this is really cool, where it breaks it down even further. You see instructional leadership, and it's like, oh, okay, doing okay, 2.72, right, on a 4-point scale. So you want to consider that, and then see community and relationship builder 2.43. And then you can start to maybe think about how you might want to prioritize, or maybe how some are interconnected. And then you can engage in further conversations with your teams locally in that regard. So I'm going to stop here for a moment because I feel like I went pretty fast, but hopefully that provided a good enough overview of the definitions and the requirements for the CNA. And I want to just stop here briefly and maybe see if there are any questions before I transition to Jeff, Mike, and Ro from Hourglass.
I have a quick question, Shirley. When we did this last year, we did the screener, but then the screener didn't give us the dashboard information, so we had to go back and actually complete the rest of the information in Hourglass. So is that still the case of what we have to do this year to get dashboard information? Does that make sense?
There it is. Good.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. So the screener is like a precursor to the actual CNA assessment itself. You complete the screener and it would tell you to do n number of the tenets. You would still have to finish beyond the screener. And then once you get to the final step, which I'll show you here in a minute, and hit save, then the results would end up on the dashboard screen that we're looking at here. If we want to take a look at yours specifically, I believe is it Tony? We can take a peek at yours. I'll note that to follow up with you. But as we go through that, I will point that out when we go through the demo.
That was just our experience last year, and we learned from that because I think it'll just save people time knowing that up front, like because you will plan better knowing that you have to still complete that to see the dashboard results. So it's just a FYI. And I was just asking if it changed. So
ideally, the experience that you had wouldn't have happened to start with. So that's what I will be taking a look at that.
Also, this is just as much like informative for the team too, because I know last time when we did a session like this, they went back and are able to clarify things or actually make some adjustments on the CNA themselves. So that way, so this is like real live also feedback moment. So thank you, Tony, for bringing that up. I really appreciate it.
I was just going
to,
Shirley and Mike, if you don't mind me jumping in really fast, and I think what Mike is about to show you, we can show you the screener versus taking the entire assessment. And I think one thing that I would react to is I did note, and I think you should make sure that you are aware which designation, Shirley, I'll ask as a question for you, which designation is required to complete the entire CNA and therefore wouldn't engage with the screener potentially.
Just give me 1 second. I'm not sure who's sharing their screen. Okay, great. The entire needs assessment would be any CSI that was like identified for the very first time this year, CSI low 5%, and it's actually of the schools, it's probably only 3 or 4 schools.
Make a note of that, and we can when you see that screen, we'll say if you're a CSI school, then you can engage with the screener if you wanted to just experience it, but you would complete the entirety of the assessment. And then we can address, Tony, what you were just describing in terms of how the screener is related to the rest of the CNA experience for sure.
Did you all want me to continue sharing or did you want to?
I can take it from here.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
All right, so you guys should be seeing my screen now. I'm going to start with the next slide. So in this demo, which we're going to try to be quick and concise with, but thorough enough to go from the beginning of a CNA all the way through the scoring of it, viewing the results, seeing some other things that are offered in the app as well, and then ultimately how to contact us and also how to get started. So with that said, I will jump right in. This is the landing experience in the app. So you'll see a few things on the page before we start an assessment. If you had any assessments that you completed part of and want to come back and finish, they're going to be in this draft queue at the top of the page. So you can jump right in. If you just clicked on one of these, it would jump right back to where you left off. This would be the dashboard that was referenced in this slide previously. So once you have completed assessments, you'll be able to see quick views into what's going right in certain areas, what may not be going right in other areas, and be able to sort and view at different levels that the assessment offers. And then there's also some resources, and I'll get to that here in a moment where those are stored, but there's some resources that some of them are related to specific scoring of certain tenets, and others are more like general program documents. And no matter what page you are on throughout the app, our contact information will always display at the bottom, as well as in this support icon up top. So as a brief overview, that is when you land in the app, and now we'll start an assessment. You can start the assessment from this page or the insights page, which we'll look at soon. You just click start assessment. You would pick your school that you're scoring for. You would give your assessment a name. Oh, excuse me. That's not the name. We would select the CNA, then give your assessment a name. And then from here, one of the collaborative team aspects of the app is that you can add or remove people from your team. So what that allows them to do is have access to this instance of scoring that you're doing. So if you, let's take the draft example. So say I completed half of this and left it off, all of the people that I would put on my team could also then access that draft as well. It's a choice if you want it or if you don't want it. And ultimately, then you select the year you're scoring for, and then you begin. So this is where you make that decision based off whether you have to do the entire assessment or want to, whether you want to take a screener to identify which tenants you want to take, or you may know which ones you want to take already. So we'll take the screener based on its relevance in our previous conversation. So in the screener, I'm not going to go through each question, but what I'll do is I will score it very differently throughout, and then it'll give me a recommendation as I get through these questions. Try to go through this quickly. The screener is pretty thorough in truly helping you identify what tenants to take. Cruise through a couple more pages here.
This is an example of what not to do, but we're just, for time's sake. I just had to throw that in there.
I really want to show you the result page, and which is also the page that you would see if you were, I missed a question, so it'll tell you that you need to go back and do that. Once we get to the results page, it's also the page where you manually select your tenants. So based off my random screener, it is telling me to take these tenants and then not these tenants, but you ultimately have a choice to override that. Or at the end of the day, select them all because you want to take the whole thing, but you wanted to see what the screener would recommend. What we're going to do for our purposes of time is we're going to just score one tenant, one small tenant. But this is ultimately the page where, based off what you selected in the screener, it would guide you to the right choices based on your responses. Once you begin, if you were doing the whole thing, you would see that it's paged by tenant. In this instance, we're only doing one tenant, so it's page. I'm just having the one page. You would then score it. If as you're scoring it, you want to know more about what the scores mean. Each dimension has a rubric to help guide you to the correct response, or the correct response for you. And then you are able to provide supporting evidence. So based on, you're giving yourself that number, that dimension is identifying itself as, instructional leadership, development, and support. So what supporting evidence is guiding you to make that selection? So you select there's different options for each dimension. So you would select those, and then at this point, you would have completed this tenant, and then you would hit continue. So we're going to jump from the rating section now all to supporting documents. So if there was supporting evidence that is that you want to include with your CNA to help explain why you scored certain things a certain way, why things may have been different from the last year, what worked, what didn't, there's a wide number of reasons why you may want to attach supporting documents, and you are able to do that here by just selecting and then ultimately dragging and dropping or finding a file on your computer, and then it would attach as a little queue. You can manage it if you want to remove it later. And then again, not required in this instance, but is available. And then you reach this summary page that says, yes, I'm naming it this, and scored it for this reason, or scored it for this season. And then I will submit it. And then when I submit it, we can do a couple of things from here. So what this page is doing, if you had one or many assessments scored for your school in a period of time. You can extend that period out to many years to see how you're doing or how things are looking over time. If things have increased from the last instance to the most current instance, it'll tell you some trends, if it's equal, down, indifferent, whatever the case may be. And that happens at all of these different levels. So that is one way to look at the data. Another way to look at the actual instance of the scoring that you did would be to go to the Insights tab. Now on the Insights tab, you specifically can look at an instance of scoring. So we just scored Jan webinar was what we called it. So you'll see that we only scored the one tenant. So we're only getting this level of information, and then we're getting the 3 responses we've had. We also then can get that printout instance that we saw, and I'm going to print a different one that's more thorough. This is what Shirley showed in that other slide where you get the whole report. So you can get the summary at the top that summarizes by the tenants. And then ultimately the detailed reports include all of the responses as they've been scored, averaged at area of focus level as well as tenant level. And you can print this out. So when finding results, you kind of have different options. So a more of a high level view, and then the instance view of a specific scoring session. Those specific scoring sessions are all accessible down here. So this is the assessment history for our demo school. And then from here, you've really done all there is for the actual scoring and reviewing the scores of the CNA, but there are a few other things, as I mentioned in here. There are helpful links if you wanted to jump to any previous recordings and things like that related to how the CNA works, different presentations. You can go to the websites. There's also at certain times of the year, there's resources added that are related to the CNA as well. So some of these were tagged with specific, I don't think they're tenants. I think they're dimensions or areas of focus. So these resources are related to those different areas of focus. And then when it comes to getting started, so for those of you who this may be entirely new for, to get started with the app, we just ask that you reach out, and I'll jump forward and jump back here, reach out to our support at hourglassets.com. And then we, if you just, even if it's something as hey, I want to get started with the CNA, we then respond back with the information we need. It's really just the names, emails, and what entities are you associated to. So if you're a district representative and you're getting like a whole set of your schools signed up, we can, take care of everyone. And then we're going to ask with one question in that gathering of information where we ask, should this person be able to see the whole district or just the school? So that's what the role is related to. And then what we do is we invite that list of people that you provided, and they are able to create their accounts. They get a simple email that says, click here to create your account. They're asked to create a password, and then ultimately are able to provided the link and are able to log in with that password that they created. So that is a quick version of the app. Do you guys have any questions about scoring a CNA or anything in the app at this point?
Yeah, Mike, there were 2 questions. Can you go back to start assessment?
Yes.
And maybe just manually select something for us to score, and then we can talk about evidence. And the question came from Kate Hatch about whether evidence is required. And I think there's a couple of ways to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to add into some of that too, but you go first.
So Mike is just going to start another CNA instance, and there's some terminology that you'll get used to as you become more familiar with the app. Instance is a really critical one. I don't know if it's the best word to use, but we do use it anyway. And I think what's really key there is, Mike, you said something about there could be one instance, there could be many instances, and we can unpack that a little bit, I suppose. But to go in order of the questions, so here you can see that as Mike was scoring the CNA, We're looking at tenant, we're looking at dimensions within that tenant, and that's where you see that list of supporting evidence. So what I'll highlight is you'll see that there are some options that are included in there that are pre-populated. You'll notice that it's not the same list of evidence for each of the dimensions. Sometimes there's overlap. It might be the same piece of evidence that exists at a school level, and that could be true across dimensions, but very frequently you'll see dimension specific lists. However, you'll also see that there's a not applicable option and there's an other option. So you don't necessarily have to pick a piece of evidence if something truly is not applicable at your campus. That's at least what the app provides. I think surely this is a great opportunity for you to jump in and you can talk a little bit more about the NDE's expectations with respect to evidence. So I'll let you take it away.
Love that. Thank you. From the, I think it was slide 14, all these bullets, and I completely overlooked the evidence bullet. The reason why this is also important is because it's a self-assessment. We might believe one thing, but actually don't have sufficient or a preponderance of evidence that tells us we're actually there's a distinct difference between 3 and 4, or a 2 and a 3, or a 1 and a 2, right? Or any of the scales. So the evidence here, while you're clicking individually, when you get to the supporting evidence piece, you will want to consider what evidence do you want to submit that supports maybe a rating for multiple pieces, right? The point here is that this is information for the NDE specifically around what we can do to better support schools, either through our own resource guidance, implementation support, or maybe direct support to schools and districts more clearly. So it's about using this as an opportunity to consider what evidence you probably don't have, right? And may want to consider that you might need for a future iteration of the CNA. But I also don't want this to become like you're preparing for an external review either, right? So we're not looking for a ton of documentation, right? If you in fact believe that personal learning opportunities, you're at a level 4 after reading everything and you have a bunch of these, you can list off whatever it is, then you're submitting whatever it is that you have available. You should not be recreating brand new things, right? Like you either have the evidence or you don't have the evidence, and that's okay. This is all, there's no stakes. All this is informing our work and back it to you informing your work. Submit to NDE, meaning on the platform. So what that means is that it's on the platform. That's where it lives, right? So not gonna keep a file somewhere, like print everything out and create a whole documentation. This is really more, you submit on the platform. So that's what that means. Everything's on this platform right here for the CNA. Oni.
And there is a second, just to make sure we touch on it. Mike, can you go back to the supporting documents? And I think, maybe that's something that we can just, again, show you what the app supports. And then surely if you want to jump in about the NDE's expectations for what's shared here. So Mike, as you were going through, you did say that it's optional to attach documentation. That's true from the app perspective. So surely there's always an opportunity for the NDE to say that you would prefer to get something. But can you just talk about how this coincides with evidence?
Yeah, we've had schools submit a document that has just a bunch of links, and it's like, here's a link to this that touches on these 3 or 4 tenants, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be an entire PDF of 400 pages, but is it evidence enough to say that you're a 3 or a 4, right? To say that you're like at the most highest level of something. That's the point of this, right? Like our team here at the NDE is about not just saying, oh, they did it, they completed the CNA and move on, right? It's about how we can better understand the actual context of each individual building and therefore their districts to be able to then appropriately support through the grant application process and then ultimately through the implementation of the next 3 years for this designation period. Or 1 year, depending if you're CSI, ATSI. So I hope that helps. It's vague and general on purpose, because not every school will have the same evidence, right? You won't have the same amount of evidence. Your evidence will be different. It'll look different because it's based off of your individual district. But if you go through and don't attach anything and you have no evidence, and you're like, you score yourselves 4s all around, you will hear from us because we want to know more. Like, that's the purpose of this. And it's meant to be learning. This is not about judgment, nor is it about you're all of a sudden going to have less of something. That's not it. We want to be able to support you best. And that's only by us being able to understand the things that I can't see on a statewide assessment. I hope that helps clarify and maybe bring down some of the anxiety that I also feel talking about it, because it's meant to be learning experience, mutually beneficial learning experience here.
And Shirley, you made me think of something. So earlier in the presentation, you had mentioned the importance of the dialogue or the communication around scoring of the CNA. And so something that's new for those of you who have met Mike and Ro and me and have sat through a presentation like this before or something similar, this is new from that last time. If you're brand new to us, then this is just the way that the app works today. So what's true today is as you're scoring a CNA instance, and so mind you, that's what Mike is doing here in this little demo, we can attach a document now. We can, this is new, if you score the CNA instance and then you decide, and maybe this is part of that dialogue, Shirley, that you just referenced, where let's just say you blasted through the scoring and you did put all 4s and you hit not applicable on everything, and you hear from Shirley or somebody else from Shirley's team, and they say, well, we'd really love for you to offer some justifications for why you scored yourself 4s. And then you might be able to say, okay, well, even though I've already submitted my CNA instance, here is the evidence that supports those 4s across the board. So the key there is you can upload or attach documentation as you're scoring the CNA. You can come back later. You can decide, this is also new, if you decide that you attached a piece of documentation that no longer seems applicable based on communication that could happen either at the school level or district level or ESU level, or with a conversation that's happening at the NDE, you can remove documentation. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and it's not that you have to do it right there in that moment. And I think also probably the other thing that supports is we had mentioned the importance of team scoring. So it should not just be you in isolation who's scoring the CNA for a particular school. It should be you with a group of individuals, all of whom who have access to different pieces of evidence. So that might be something where if it's a team that's uploading documentation, kind of separately at different times, the app supports that as well. And then it looks like there's a question about what document types can be attached. And I think, Mike, you can answer that if you go back to that. Yeah. So if you click here, you can see it's basically every document type under the sun. If you find that there's something that's missing, you can always let us know. But I would be very surprised and impressed. And so, yeah, the video files, just to answer that specifically, Shirley, from your comment. So I see the M4A, the MOV, MP4. Let's see, anything else in there? Okay, so those should cover at least some of the basics if you're recording it on a PC, if you're recording it on a Mac, if you're recording it on your iPhone, that sort of thing. And yes, Dottie, that sums it up beautifully. Pretty much all document types can be uploaded. Or going with the point before, if you upload them, you can also remove them later if you decide that you no longer want to have it.
This also goes without saying, like, it shouldn't be personally identifiable information, right? Like, things you want to consider about the sensitivity of it. Granted, thank you, yes. It would only be our NDE team reviewing this information and anyone else who may have had access to your school or district based on the roles that you've identified. But just wanted to reiterate that privacy is critical, and again, learning experience for all involved.
Shirley, I would just like to ask a question. So when you think about documentation to upload, is the more you put, the better, or not?
Not necessarily, right?
Thank you.
I cannot stress enough, like, you're not someone made me, this is not, this is not preparing for an external like site visit. It's not like, you know, you're writing a dissertation or a thesis, whatever. No, right? But it should be, right? Things that are in alignment with how you may have scored or your team may have scored themselves on a particular dimension, tenant, etc. Right? And you'll find, as many of you already know, you'll find that there's pieces of evidence that cover multiple pieces. And like that's perfect, right? We also don't need a whole narrative, but the purpose is that the substance of the evidence is going to help us better understand your rating and also help us understand where we may need to also provide additional support and guidance and etc. like I've described thus far. So more is definitely not better all the time. And this is more about you all experiencing this process together as a team. I'll tell you from the first time we started this in 2018, where we had leaders tell us, well, I had to do it. I just did it real quick, you know, because the timing was up. Like, I get it. I understand this is far from perfect. But we want to make sure that if you're engaging in this process and you're taking time from teams already, right, that you're doing this to the best of your ability and as open as honestly as possible so that everyone, including the NDE, can also continue to improve. Most importantly, your students.
Shirley, there was something that I wanted to highlight, and this goes back, at least in part, to what Tony was describing before about the relationship between the screener and the CNA and the dashboard. So I asked Mike to filter this very specifically so that it mimics what is this going to look like the very first time that you access the app. So you log in. So Marco, we hope that we answered your question satisfactorily about how you would get access to the CNA web app. Now you have access. You log in for the very first time. You haven't scored anything. So you're going to see a dashboard that looks like this. You're going to see a whole lot of gray. You can see that the gray says means no data available yet. You haven't actually done anything besides log in, but that is a really important step. So Marco, thank you for confirming that you know how to do that. And if anybody's still unclear about logging in, please say so, and we can cover it one more time before we exit too. But this is going to be your experience. So you've not yet provided any data. You haven't started those important conversations at your school level to be able to facilitate the scoring of a CNA. And then this is where you have that opportunity to either complete the entire assessment. And Mike, maybe you can just show where you would go about doing that again, just to really drive that point home. So you're going to go to start an assessment. This is where you can pick your entity. And actually, Ro brought up a really good point. We should talk a little bit about the relationship about entities. So I'll cover that in a second. But this is where you're going to start your assessment. You're going to name the assessment. You're going to pick your assessment team members. You're going to make sure that it's tied to the 23-24 school year. And then you go. And now you can complete the entire thing. You can take the screener, or you can manually select tenants. So don't be alarmed if you log in and you see just nothing but gray the first time you access the app. If your school has no information from a previous year, that's by design. As soon as you've completed an actual CNA assessment or instance, I think maybe we go kind of back and forth with those terms. That's when you'll start seeing data populate on your dashboard with one other key thing that we can show you about filtering for completed CNAs or draft CNAs. But to be very clear, even if you take the screener to identify tenants, you're still not going to see any data on your dashboard because you still have not actually completed a CNA assessment. I think the CNA assessment, the thing that throws me off there is it's because it's the comprehensive needs assessment. So I'm saying assessment. So I think that's why we invented the word instance. But if anybody here has a better term, to please volunteer it. But I'll go back to saying CNA instance now. So once you complete a CNA instance or have started to complete a CNA instance, you'll start seeing data populate on your dashboard. The screener itself is purely designed to help you know what tenants you might focus on. And so it won't actually populate to the dashboard. And then just okay, this question's not immediately germane. Mike, can you just show on the filtering of the dashboard? You can filter your way out of data. And that is what I had Mike do. So if you looked in the time range box a minute ago, Mike very selectively picked December 5th through December 5th, and he did that on purpose because he wanted to filter out any of the CNA data. But another thing that you could do is if you go up under filters, you can see there's at least an option to, I think, Mike, I'm providing real information, but under filters there's completed and draft. So this is really critical. So a completed assessment is one where if we went through that process and Mike actually hit submit, that means it's completed. Up to any point before submission, it's going to be draft. And there might be a reason, this is all by design, so the dashboard I hope is somewhat intuitive, but there might be a reason why you want to see only completed assessments. Maybe you want to focus on just draft assessments. Maybe you want to see them both at the same time. Maybe you want to focus on specific tenants. So you can see here, that's all the filtering that you can apply there. I think the most critical thing would be if for whatever reason you used to see data and now you stop seeing data, chances are you filtered your way out of the data, and just know you can always go back to a more expansive view. And I hope I'm not sharing anything that's completely brand new. I don't think we did anything with this dashboard that's wholly unfamiliar to you. So once you get in and start playing around with the app, I hope it's really intuitive for you. One thing that we did want to talk about is the relationship between entities. And so Mike, maybe if in just the drop, it's kind of hard to do with the NDE demo school. So we may not be able to, you can at least see that there's a relationship between district and school. So what is true is now we're actually looking at a real, so I don't know if there's anybody here from South Sioux City community schools, but if you don't mind us at least using, very publicly available information like the name of your district and the name of your schools to highlight this point. What is really critical about the app is it supports different user levels. So what I mean by that is you might be a school level user. So perhaps you're at Cardinal Elementary School. You might be a district level user, which means you're actually at South Sioux City Community Schools. You might be an ESU level user. I don't recall what ESU number is associated to South Sioux City Community Schools. 1. Okay. ESU 1. And then, of course, you might be somebody like Shirley, where you're at the NDE level, and you can see everything across all of the ESUs, all the districts, and all the schools. This is probably, I don't know, Ro, if you said this was the #1 support ticket item, but it's definitely up there in terms of the relationship between the school and the district. And so this is a very, very common scenario. We can always undo something if you do something incorrectly, but what seems to happen is somebody might, and I think it's somebody who would have to have district level access, is out in the schools, supporting a school in the completion of a CNA. And then instead of scoring the CNA at the school level, scores it at the district level. And so then eventually comes along later and says, I know I was out at Cardinal Elementary School and I know we completed a CNA and it's not there. What's great is behind the scenes, we can move it from the district level to the school level. But since you guys are all here, this is a recording, always go back the recording, or if you watch, or you can tell your friends about the recording. What's true is we can always undo something, but just be really careful about what entity you are landing on when you're completing the CNA. And so to run with my example, if you're at Cardinal Elementary School and you're scoring the CNA for Cardinal Elementary School, just make sure you've selected Cardinal Elementary School and not South Sioux City Community Schools. I don't want to belabor that point, but does that make sense, that entity relationship? And I'll just kind of look at, I see probably 24 of you. And if you guys all kind of nod, and I see some nodding. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Denise, thank you.
And Jeff, I want to reference one thing to that, and it actually may have came from Grand Island, Tony, is that last year at some point we changed this drop down defaulted to the district, so you weren't seeing the data for the school you may have just scored, and so that may have came from you guys. I'm not sure, but we changed it to where it defaults to the first school in a district, or in this instance, the only school in the district. If you can see that many entities, if you're just tied to a school, it'll default to the school level, not the district level. Whereas last year at one point, I believe, for the most part of the beginning of the year, it defaulted to the district. So that could have been why you weren't seeing data, but definitely honing in on the right entity on this page is important.
And then, Mike, can we just very quickly aloud cover this one because it looks like it's been asked a couple of times. So once we spin up CNA Web Access for, let's just say it's one member of your team, and then you want to add additional team members, the question is, do you have to let us know who all of those team members are at the very beginning, or can we add them later on?
You can add them whenever you'd like. Currently, the permissions for giving out access to the system are either with an ESU contact or with us directly. We are happy to add new users at any point. So you don't need to have everyone right away, and can definitely follow us up with us, and within a short period of time we can get them added.
And then maybe the only note that I'll add there, and again, I apologize if we're hitting you with a lot on the second day of the new year and you guys are just back, or you're maybe still on vacation, but there is a difference between users who have access to the app and then folks who can score a CNA instance. And so just be aware that those are two things. Contact us here at support if you have any questions about what that means. But if you think users, it could be a very extensive list of folks who you want to have see the CNA data that gets entered. And then there was, if you recall, when Mike was going through the workflow of completing a CNA, the very first thing he had to do when he clicked start assessment was identify team members. You can always come back and you can edit the team members who are associated to a CNA. The key difference there is if you want to actually edit a CNA, you have to be a team member who's invited to interact with that specific CNA. And here's why that's critically important. I'm going to give like a 20-second nugget about this. And if you're interested in doing this, reach out to us and we'll walk you through this. We want to, the app supports this. You could have, let's say it's Cardinal Elementary. You could have 5 different users at was it Cardinal City, Cardinal Elementary? You guys know who I'm talking about. You could have 5 different users, each of whom could be scoring a user specific or team member specific instance of the CNA. And then team member 1 can't edit team member 2's CNA, but they can all see the data as it gets reported. So that's like super user stuff. If you want to delve into that and really put the CNA web app through its paces, please do reach out to us. We can come up with all kinds of really complex ways to support your school or your district or your ESU in using the CNA web app. And we can't get into all of it in 1 hour. So we're friendly. We'll happily jump on a Zoom. We can email with you. You can actually text us at that number that you see in the CNA web app. Yeah, please do reach out. And I think, Shirley, that's my little plug to end our portion of this, noting that we're coming up on the hour.
Yes, I love that. And I did see that Angie had asked if I'm interpreting your question correctly, you at the individual district be able to manage the users. And I think that's something that the team could potentially allow and make happen. Yes.
If you
Maybe.
really want to do that, it's something that we can support, but we would want to have a quick session with you to show you how you would do so. In the meantime, please do just reach out to us, and this is our information. So support@hourglassets.com. You're going to get Mike, Rowe, and me. And then anytime we send you something, this is just a note. It's going to come from noreply@hourglassets.com if it's something that's system generated. Otherwise, it will be one of the 3 of us who's answering your support requests or texting you back or calling you back, depending on how you reach out to us.
And then there's one comment from Dave regarding a list of roles or what permission each role has. So is that something that's provided after they send the initial email, right?
Yeah, why don't we, Dave, we'll take this as a question if you think that would be something. The roles are really tied to those entities that I described. So once you get into the app, it's really dependent. Everybody can do the same things within the app. The question is, how many entities can they see? That's really the only role distinction. But since you asked the question, if you reach out to us, or if anybody else reaches out to us, we can share some information when you hear back from us about how the roles operate, and that will help you know who you should set up as users and what have you.
Shirley, I think there's still some questions about how do you do building level? Do you do district level? How would you do that?
Oh,
sorry, I totally missed that question.
We can hang out. I wanted to respect anybody who had to drop off at the hour. We are happy to hang out for as long as you guys want to hang out with us.
Excellent. So, and directly to your question, I would say that, I mean, some school districts requested that the NDE inform the district first because they have their own communication protocol. So you may want to consider if that's something that's true for you all, or if you communicate directly with the principals already, they could reach out. If it's an instance where, now this is not just to Anne directly, but in general, like I mentioned at the top of the hour, if you have multiple schools, maybe you want to first have a understanding of the CNA yourself. Also, your ESU is a great resource here. A lot of our ESU staff developers across the state have engaged with the CNA and also been part of the development of the CNA, which is wonderful. So please make sure to reach out to them as well, so that you can have an understanding of maybe you want them to focus on multiple or different types of tenants, or maybe you already have a district structure, so you may want to roll it out a particular type of way. That really is left up to the district to decide how you may want to engage your schools that way. But I don't want to say it doesn't matter because it really is a personal preference, but up to how you all would like to do that. So hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, thanks, Shirley. We would love to be able to take something off of our principals' plates if we could. And so I just wanted to make sure, would that be okay if we started the process and got everything set up on their behalf before we dig in as a team?
Absolutely. I love it. Okay. It's 4:03. Is that Mike? Yeah, Mike, do you mind going to the last slide there? Thank you.
Yeah.
For many of you that are still on, we do have a really quick survey. Always making sure we're able to improve off of the things that we do. So please take a moment. Dottie did put it in the chat there, 3-question survey there. Thank you to Hourglass for the continued partnership and the presentation. I always learn something new every time I hear you all going through that. I'm like, I thought I knew everything. I don't. Great. Have a great rest of your day, week, and hope 2024 is going great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Shirley, when will the recording be available and how will we get it?
Stop recording.